Run and put it.
Just be like a backbench empty. Yeah. If you're just ahead of it.
It's still in pieces.
Yeah, I left that. Thanks so much for so Joel, in one of my opening comments, I thought about the Friday seminar. So she's doing essentially right. Oh, yeah. And so I'm gonna make a comment. I'll do that. Maybe take like an apple to or take out it. Bring it in. Still be doing the same thing. In our and on Friday, he's not in the I'm it's a little better. I mean, we should probably say that, right? There's something. That's ask you. Yeah. I mean, oh, I mean, I was not at this point. And they're like, so our the 5 rivers. Yeah, and it we felt that we a little bit of honesty. Well, let's make all put on black back tonight. And so our deal was that we
Yeah.
I heard with that. You know, I heard.
So, yeah, but I. Oh, I wrote the line.
And I'll just. I think there are.
Yeah, I need to look at it.
Since you're originally close, make it fine, but actually.
Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for coming. My name is James Winter. I'm a WASH advisor in the Bureau for Global Health at USAID, and I want to welcome you all to coming to this session on market-based sanitation in Sub-Saharan Africa. We're really looking forward to sharing findings from 3 really wonderful projects that are wrapping up in Senegal, Ethiopia, and Uganda. Our experience over the last several years has shown us that sanitation markets are a real precondition for sustainable change in access and sanitation. And we really believe that integrating markets as a routine part of our sanitation is a critical part of continuing our progress forward. There have been so many advancements in the sanitation sector, especially in rural sanitation, over the last several years. And I think that it's really important to note that while behavior change focus and behavior change only programs, something like a CLTS, community-led total sanitation, still have a lot of value and a lot of importance, but we're also starting to realize some of the limitations to these approaches. The new lexicon that USAID is using for our sanitation programming is area-wide. And in this approach, we're focusing on a larger administrative unit, something like a county or maybe a district, rather than individual villages or even households. And this sets a more ambitious target for universal coverage, but we also think it's a valuable one. Getting to this level of scale requires a mixture of approaches. There's no silver bullet. And the components of market-based sanitation, as well as complementary programming around governance, finance, behavior change, and markets is critical to reaching our goals. I want to, speaking of some of the governance and finance work that USAID is doing, I want to invite you all also to the Friday session that USAID will be hosting in the morning, a side event that will be a discussion of the recently unveiled global water strategy in collaboration with USAID and the State Department. There are a couple of handouts at the end of that table over there. Market-based sanitation approaches in particular have become a focus of some of USAID's programming over the last 5 years, especially through some of the great work that WashPals has been doing. And there are certain best practices that have come to light. Things like sales and marketing support, focusing on strengthening a sanitation enterprise as an add-on to an existing profitable business rather than an enterprise in and of itself. But what's exciting about this session and the 3 case studies that will be discussed today is some of the innovation that they've done and some of the novel approaches. They've gone beyond some of the building blocks or foundations of market-based sanitation. So USAID's Uganda Sanitation for Health Activity, USHA, will present results and learning implementing a novel network delivery model to catalyze community sanitation across 13 districts. Next, Transform WASH in Ethiopia will showcase supply chain development for affordable, innovative, and quality sanitation products and services. And finally, the XA project in Senegal. We'll discuss some of the really interesting work around marketing and branding that they did using a human-centered design approach. So after the conclusion of each of our three presentations, there will be a brief question and answer period, but we'll also be closing with approximately a 20-minute panel with our three speakers, as well as my USA colleague, Dejani Kumela from USAID Ethiopia, who also worked on the Transform WASH project in Ethiopia to add his perspective as well. So thank you again very much for coming and joining us at the session. And at this point, I'll pass it off to Maurice Israel from Tetra Tech to introduce.
So thank you and hello, everybody. James asked me to just say a few words to set the context for the market-based sanitation work that USAID has been doing over the last couple of years, largely through the USAID WASH PALS program. And so as part of our work on market-based sanitation, and as we thought through, and some of this goes back many years, or 5 years or so, 4 or 5 years, we came up with this framework for market-based sanitation. And many of you may have seen it. And it's something that stemmed from a lot of conversations, a lot of review.
Can I get you to stand a little bit closer to the microphone?
You sure can.
Great,
Thank you. And it's something that we found very useful as we investigated some of the projects, as we did some of our research, as we captured our learning, to really understand the different elements that make up the broader framework within which market-based sanitation occurs. And we've seen it used over the last couple of years, both through to design programs, but also to evaluate programs and essentially to understand the different aspects of the sector. So within this framework, the first WASH PALS program focused on 2 areas. On trying to understand enterprise viability and the factors that really affect the viability of enterprises. And it's something that I think we'll see come through in the presentations that follow as well. And we also spent a fair amount of time trying to understand the market rules of that business environment. So just going back here, you'll see the inner elements of the framework as the customer, the enterprise, the entrepreneur, and each one of those has barriers and constraints to their ability to be successful. That's couched within the broader business environment that looks at things such as supply chains, policies, institutions, regulations, market, public goods, those sorts of things. And then the broader context of cultural norms, transportation networks, all sort of things within the market. And so, as I said, we focused on the enterprise viability, and then this bit about the policies, regulations, and laws. And a lot of this information is available on the USAID globalwaters.org site. A valuable, I would say, trove of information on this work. So this, together with some other activities that we undertook on executing some sanitation market assessments and a few other activities, led us to be able to extract a few higher level takeaways that just a few of which I want to run through, that I think also help us lay the context for understanding where the 3 projects that we'll hear about are coming from, and seeing how some of these things have been integrated into that. The first, something that James kind of alluded to, is that enterprises that focus solely on sanitation are rarely viable enterprises themselves. So it really, what came through pretty clearly is that sanitation needs to be one of several business lines within a company, an enterprise, something that works on cement blocks or cement rings or something along those lines. Secondly, that we really ought to focus effort on ensuring the viability of those companies. So even as a multi-business line company, there still are issues of viability, and particularly within the sanitation business line. We need to understand the costs and ensure that we actually fully incorporate a lot of the costs that we as implementing partners or as donors often assume in place of the company. So those need to be internalized. And an example is sales agents. Oftentimes, we say here, active sales are necessary. We need to be able to convert latent demand into demand fulfillment, if you will. And the sales agent is often not something that a smaller enterprise can fund. So donors, NGOs will fund those. When the program ends, that funding goes away, the sales agents go away. And what happens with the company? So thinking through the costs that need to be internalized as part of that. It is important to play a role in the business environment. What is it about the policies? What is it about those other barriers outside of the enterprise and the customer that we can work? There's policy, there's supply chain issues, there are all sorts of elements that need to be incorporated. And I think, in some ways it goes without saying, but as each program is designed and you're understanding the context, and you do that sort of barrier analysis of the impacts on developing a market, those kinds of things need to be front and center. The other thing that was really striking from the programs that we were able to analyze and evaluate that really had scaled, that had sold hundreds of thousands or tens of thousands of toilets, is that it really does take time. And market development cannot happen in a 3-year, or often a 5-year project cycle. It does take time. And so much just depends on what your entry points are, where the country is, or a portion of the country is when you're starting to develop your activities. But the sustained investment, sustained support to be able to really ensure that the enterprises are viable and that there is a functioning market does take time. The last bullet here is probably a crass way of saying what James said, is that everything, this markets alone and MBS programs alone are not sufficient. We do continue to need the behavior change. We need the subsidy. We need part of a package. MBS is part of a package of interventions, particularly as we try to reach area-wide sanitation goals of universal access to safely managed sanitation. So while on the one hand, we say markets aren't everything, I think when we look forward to working in an area-wide system, we're probably going to be asking more of markets. And particularly in an area-wide system where you are trying to reach more remote areas, where you have vulnerable groups and the such, this issue of how can markets do a better job at reaching some of those remote areas, of really responding to vulnerable segments of the population. And then also looking at the safely managed side of things. I think the fecal sludge management and where we're going, there's obviously a very strong role for the market. That's something that particularly in rural areas has been is nascent, to say the least. And these are two areas that we'll be looking at under Wash Pals 2. And and seeing where we go with that. I think it's incredibly challenging. And what you'll see from the next couple of presentations is how these programs are grappling with some of these issues and some of the innovations that have come through at a country level, at a sub-county level, et cetera, the contexts, and some really, really interesting stuff. So with that, let me turn it over to Jonathan Annis, walk us through the Uganda program.
Thank you, Morris. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jonathan Annis, Chief of Party for USHA, the USAID Uganda Sanitation for Health Activity. So USHA is a 66-month activity. We'll be closing here very soon. We work in 20 districts. The focus of this presentation is going to be on our work in the 13 districts here in the southern part of the country, where we used an area-wide approach to market-based sanitation, focusing in 2 to 3 of the sub-counties, trying to reach over 300,000 households. The target sub-counties were mostly rural, with baseline basic sanitation, as you can see, for 18%, unimproved sanitation, 42%, and still 29% of the households without a toilet. Over the past 3 years, you can see quite a bit of movement where we've been able to get to over 71,000 households gaining access to basic sanitation. 32% of those going from having no latrine to having basic. This has stimulated what we estimate close to $7.2 million of household investments into the market. And so far, we've been able to move roughly 34% of the total target market. So the presentation here today is just to explain a little bit about how we went about this and what we did. So we started with a whole bunch of formative research, trying to use the market-based sanitation framework that you saw earlier from Morris. I'm going to focus more on what we did at the very core of that for the enterprise, trying to bring the consumers together with the entrepreneurs. And we looked at this in terms of identifying best fit products, activating demand, and facilitating a network delivery model. So first, in terms of best fit products, so what's a best fit product? It's a product that is most suited for a customer unique needs, their ability to pay, and their preferences. So the research suggested that many of the toilets that were already on the market there in Uganda actually met a lot of the preferences that the household wanted. It was for these reasons that we did not see a need for a lot of engineering of the toilets, but to be able to optimize some of the designs that were already there, to be able to save costs on the depth of the pit, to save costs on the thickness of the slab, for instance, and to standardize some of the dimensions. We introduced precast slabs, as you can see here on the pictures, that were made using a formwork that was made of wood. We initially started with these 4 toilet options here. All 4 could be retrofitted with a Sato pan, all the way from a simple toilet upgrade, all the way to a new double stance toilet. We later introduced these other 3 types of toilet models for households in places with high water tables and with difficult soil conditions. But really, I think the core of the innovation here with this model is what we call a network delivery model. So this is a continuum, basically, of all the different ways that toilets can be delivered to your customer. I think that we typically think of some of these that are more on the far right of the continuum, fuller types of aggregation, to try to reduce the touch points that a household may have to be able to get the product that they want. Currently in rural Uganda, and probably in most rural places in Sub-Saharan Africa, people are all the way here on the extreme other side into the do-it-yourself model. We were really trying to take them only one more step to try to aggregate, most importantly, the information that they needed to get the toilets that they were looking for. We identified the Mason as what we called the focal point enterprise, here in red, to be able to play that node to work with the households to get them all of the information that they needed to be able to build their toilet. We thought that trying to put together a more aggregated model would not be feasible because of the high working costs of capital, the lack of supplier financing, the low toilet sales volumes, etc. So what did we do? What was the core of the model? So the core of the model really had these four touch points or four processes. It started with community meetings that were facilitated by some of our local partners. These were community-based organizations, along with district local government staff to talk about the current status of sanitation within the communities, to introduce the best fit products and their benefits, and to introduce the focal point enterprise. So both the Masons and the sales promoters. Then we went, after we were done with community meetings, that's when the sales promoters that were armed with the information that we had from the baseline census that we did to go house to house and to sell sanitation. This isn't only talking about what the health benefits are of having a toilet. It's really trying to identify what are the motivators that the people in those areas were going to resonate with as they were making the decision to purchase their toilet. Once there seemed to be a household that was interested in construction, the sanitation promoters would refer those households to the focal point enterprise, who would then come do kind of the final sales and construct their toilet. After they agreed on, all of the characteristics that they were looking for, one of the things about the network delivery model is that the choice and a lot of the work that needs to be done to get all of sand, all the other materials that are needed still sits with the household. But then they work with the mason to construct their toilet. So there's quite a few things here that we could take away, but I want to leave you here with three, really. And that is, the first being how important it was in this context to allow for flexibility for the households to be able to get the type of toilet product that they wanted. We saw a lot of variability in terms of what they wanted for their slab. Only 28% of the households went for the precast slabs. All the other ones were still doing traditional slabs that were skidded with concrete. The second is around the depth of the pit. We were advising households to dig between 15 to 20 feet. Almost all of them went to 35 to 40 feet, which is pretty typical of what they're currently doing, and really done to be able to extend the life of the toilet. And then finally, you know, a lot of variability in terms of the superstructure. There were single stands, there were double stands, there were curtain walls, you know, that were added. There were bathing shelters, you know, that were added. So people didn't really stick very prescriptively to the designs that we were thinking. So allowing the flexibility for the households really seemed to be one of the catalysts to make the model work. The second one is that we were really interested in terms of what was the information channel that really resonated with the households, that kind of pushed them to make their investment. So these were surveys that we did of, you know, all 71,000 households. I think for this one, we got responses for close to 51,000 households, telling us that very clearly the community meeting and the follow-up visits from the sanitation promoters is really what was driving them to make this decision. Some of the other things that in traditional programs have been used, like enforcement, social pressure, did not seem to be really what was driving people to make their investment. It's clear that the sanitation promoters played a really critical role, not only following up once, but often needing to go back 2, 3, possibly 4 times. Because in rural areas, people build their toilets in stages over time, and it's not a one-time transaction. We, as a product, we were able to motivate the sales promoters by giving them a small incentive between $1 to $2 US for every toilet that was sold. That kind of gets back to the point that Morris made earlier about how do we transition that off, and maybe we can talk about that later. So there was a small incentive there, as well as what we heard from them, you know, was just wanting to be part of this community process and the pride that they had in playing this role. And the third key takeaway is probably going to be the most surprising, and that is that only 9% of the 71,000 toilets were actually constructed by the masons that we trained. Interesting, huh? When we went back to try to understand this more, it was clear that the households preferred to go with the mason that they already knew, probably had already worked with in the past, or someone that was referred by a friend. So contrary to what we thought when we put the model together, it was clear that the information from the mason actually was not as critical as we thought, and that through the SPs, through the community meetings, that the households were able to get the information and you know, all the knowledge that they needed to be able to go through with their toilet construction. And because we were still using toilet models that were largely already available, it made it easier for them to be able to go to a trained mason, or to a mason that they already knew, probably someone that, you know, had help them to build their own home, to also build their toilet. So I just wanted to stop there and just to say that this has been really quite a long journey. We've been working very closely with the Ministry of Health, with the Ministry of Water for the last 3.5 years on this. Very recently, back in March, the Ministry of Health, they passed the Uganda national sanitation market guidelines for basic sanitation. This is really a policy document that tries to take a lot of the learnings and a lot of the social research that went in to this model to try to be able to get it out more through the public sector and the civil society channels. We've also co-sponsored with UNICEF a national workshop on market-based sanitation for a lot of the ministry officials, and we're doing quite a bit of other work at the national level to continue to reset this conversation in Uganda away from what it has been for the last 20 years of focus on open defecation free CLTS work to something that we really believe is going to be more sustainable in the long term. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Jonathan. We have time for one, maybe two questions. If you'd like, you can come up to the microphone in the middle. If they don't come up to the microphone, Jonathan, could you repeat the question?
Sure, but please come up to the microphone.
And if you wouldn't mind introducing yourself.
Thanks. Julia Rosenbaum with FHI 360. Thanks, Jonathan. It was really insightful.
Thanks, Julie.
Two-part question. One is, I'm just curious, how much was quality of the
Yeah.
latrine affected when the household chose to go with a non-project trained
Yeah,
mason, and how much was cost? Was it cheaper to go outside?
yeah.
And then my second question I'm throwing at you is, when you talked about what were the most effective, what activated demand most,
Mm-hmm.
and you talked about that it was sort of the community meetings as one of, but
Mm-hmm.
not social pressure.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to equate, but often, did you sort out at all that difference of like, what happened at the community meetings that wasn't social pressure, since social pressure was so low and the meetings were so high?
Sure enough, yeah. Okay.
Thanks.
I think that the quality question is, the one that is potentially the most obvious, right? I think there's a question though, really about, were the trainings that we were giving to the Masons, were they teaching them something new? Were they teaching them something that they didn't know already, you know? These are the same Masons that are building their houses out of the exact same materials. Their houses are certainly not falling down, you know? I do think that what we were trying to do with the trained Masons was to hopefully to be able to get them to build the same product for cheaper. As it turned out, the Masons who were not trained were still able to build the exact same product for the same price, or for possibly even slightly less. So you know, I think that there probably were some issues with what we were training on, and if those skills were really making them be a differentiator within the marketplace. And you know, we've been monitoring this. We haven't, you know, heard of or seen any issues with pit collapses, you know, but I do think it's an area that we need to continue to watch closely. I don't think that we've carefully unpacked what it is exactly that happens at the community meetings, and how in the responses from the respondents that may be different from social pressure. I think that that's a good question, and possibly something that we'll be able to look into more. Yeah.
Hi, my name is Sophia Hilali, and I work for RTI International.
Sure.
My question is that I'm actually curious, in the areas where open defecation is still a common practice where you work, did you go straight for the best fit product, or did you think about first promoting some smaller scale upgrades for the household, convincing them that there is a market solution before getting to this best fit product?
So I think we're actually trying to dispel what I believe, for so long has been a myth that there is a sanitation ladder that people somehow slowly walk themselves up. I think what we've seen is that people can be motivated, even those who are currently practicing open defecation can be motivated actually to get in to a fairly high level of sanitation. For the new toilets that were constructed, the average price was $177 US, which is quite an investment for a rural household. So they really were seeing some value in this, and they were willing to invest, in a very sturdy product. So we weren't trying to necessarily take people along the ladder. We were trying to pull them up to where we thought that they could be for the long term. Do we still have time for another question, James? Sorry, I could.
You could save it for the panel, then we'll make sure we get to it. Yeah, thank you.
Okay,
Okay, thanks, John.
sure. Let me invite up Monty. Monty, we're back. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And thank you, Jonathan. I think we're going to see a lot of parallels and cross-learning from all of our activities. My name is Monty Achenbach, and I'm the Chief of Party for USAID Transform WASH in Ethiopia. Let me get to my slide here. There we go. So we were originally a 5-year activity extended by a couple of years, and we've been implementing as PSI with consortium partners, Plan International, SNV, and IRC WASH. And good to see members of the team all here from Ethiopia. As with the other activities, following market-based approaches to improving sanitation in Ethiopia. The objectives of the activity are very similar to what Jonathan was just describing. We have all of the ingredients of market development covered, from improving the enabling environment. The Ethiopian government is very involved in every aspect of the economy in the country. So making sure that we're opening space and building capacity among government officials at all levels, especially regional and district, to work with us and then work on their own to build sanitation markets. Of course, the fundamentals, economics 101 of supply and demand, improving options through the supply chain, and demand, of course, for those products, so that businesses actually want to enter this area. And learning, that's what we're here to do today, right? So I'll start with supply chain, talking a bit about how we approach and how we've evolved in developing supply chains in the country. And then I'll talk a bit about the demand side and how we've been building businesses, the suppliers' ability to create demand for their own products. So we're involved at all levels, from the manufacturer at the top, producing products that are affordable, that are relevant for households, and that they can affordably purchase themselves to improve their own sanitation, all the way down to the supply chains, distributors, retailers, and to those that are closest to the customer, masons and other construction companies that can provide the kinds of products and services that households need. So when we first got started, we saw that there was an initial strong focus on concrete slabs. I think everybody knows about the concrete slab. Something that businesses can produce, that can be sold locally, provide a platform, some sort of a facility for households to have improved sanitation. But we immediately saw through our research, through the work that we were doing, that there was a big question. Is it possible to scale an approach like this with a product like this? We found that there were a very limited number of suppliers available to work this market. Lack of land, expansion space, molds like the one you see here to create the product. Very difficult transportation. They're heavy and they're expensive relatively for households. So no big surprise, pretty slow sales growth on this product. So some of the other consumer insights that we gauged were that households wanted to build on what they had. They didn't necessarily want something new. They were willing to pay, but for lower cost upgrades to a greater extent than a full solution. Although Jonathan is right. That doesn't mean there's no segment, and we'll talk about that in a bit, but many customers didn't want to pay much for their improvements. So while they might aspire to something like a concrete slab, they wanted to make slow adjustments and were reluctant to pay for a big leap. So this is a Sato pan. Maybe many of you have seen this. It's produced by Lixil. I call it as close to a magic bullet as you can get. It's a great hook of a product because it solves so many problems that households have. It takes away the smell. It's kind of attractive. It's a pretty blue. It has a self-closing lid and prevents flies from emerging. Great little product that is easy for households to understand and to imagine other kinds of upgrades around. So like a centerpiece of a product. But what happened when we first started promoting this through our businesses? Our early action research showed that there were quite a few supply issues related to it, most of which had to do with do-it-yourself installation. So you see this photo here, kind of nasty. That's not improved sanitation. It's unimproved sanitation. I mean, it's improved a little bit. They have a great new Sato pan, but questionable quality. And about 80% of the households were doing this kind of thing. So we had high levels of satisfaction, but almost all wanted to make further improvements, and this is where they got started. So what to do about that? How do we get ourselves out of that issue of so many self-installations? Our business partners innovated. It wasn't just us, it was our business partners that came up with a lot of ideas for what they could do with this little Sato pan that could get a household closer to improved sanitation. So this involves segmenting the products and services to the right kind of customer with the right kind of product. Door-to-door installation options became the product and service of choice through a range of retrofitting services that could meet the customer's demand where the customers were with many different kind of products. The one on the bottom is produced in Ethiopia, also a plastic slab that's a great alternative to something like a Sato pan, especially in low water table areas or low water areas where households may not be able to flush a toilet. So business models evolved as a result of this, from the very advanced construction companies that could make a full toilet, could make whole houses, to basic manufacturing, low-level masonry. You might have a little bit of land. You could produce a smaller slab like this one, a mini slab that might be transportable and could be offered to households that need just a smaller upgrade, to door-to-door simple upgrades. And this was a de-skilled class of business that was added to our portfolio. And lastly, plastic product sales and support by retailers. We tried to segment in a way that customers would get what they needed from their local businesses. Whole range of products then, full toilet construction to concrete rings, Sato pan retrofitting, the different business types from the advanced to basic to mason installer to retailers had different options that they could offer depending on what customers wanted. Big check marks are the primary products that they offer, and smaller they also offer, but maybe isn't their main business. So quite a range of products that they can offer and services. But we quickly realized as well that we needed to pay attention to the demand side. Suppliers had the technical skills. You saw the whole range of things that they could produce, but could they sell them? Can they interest households in the various options that are available to them? We shifted focus from a demand perspective to these sales skills that we thought were critical for suppliers to be able to sell what they had to offer. Door-to-door requires excellence in sales, and very, very few of the providers we worked with, businesses we worked with, had those sales skills. So we employed the the amazing skill sets and abilities of Witten and Roy Partnership, WRP. Hopefully you've heard of them. The representative is here, Tyler, to work with us to develop a sales training program for our team. And we adopted what they call their DQ, kind of like EQ for emotional intelligence, but DQ for decision intelligence. How intelligently are households making decisions about their own sanitation options? So we adopted that approach, and I'll show you that it's a mix of skill and motivation that leads to results. We're off to the races. Race is the framework that WRP has developed. It's a combination of attitude, competence, and execution that will get results. I find this very interesting, nice and simple, but interesting, because C is what we usually focus on, the competence, right? All of our training is about competence. Even the follow-up is about competence. But if you imagine this fulcrum moving left and right, attitude moving backward and moving forward, you can move attitude backwards. You can have a low attitude, but you'll see that your execution is going to have to be a lot better. You're going to have to push a lot harder on the execution to get the same results. Same thing, if your attitude moves forward, it'll be a lot easier to bring up your results. So the combination of these is what's critical in making any sales program, and I would say any team, to work well. To make this work, though, and make sure that we were on top of all these elements of success, we put in place with WRP a weekly monitoring program so that we could keep our finger on what was actually happening in the sales program. We could look at the performance of our own business development team, our coaches, and look at the achievement of our partners as well. So we selected a number of special numbers, we called them. These were key performance indicators to look at how well we're doing on the job so that we could do quick troubleshooting and adaptation. So this is just an example. I know it's hard for you to see, but this is a typical dashboard that we have. I can look at live every day. Every single one of our team members or staff members has a series of these charts of our special numbers. The top one is the number of coaching sessions that business development advisor has done that week, how many times they've actually gotten out and they've seen a business. We also have a separate one for the number of hours they put into it. The more recently they've trained a business, of course, the more hours we'd expect they need to spend. The more time goes by and they're just following up and coaching, we want to see that number coming down. So we're trying to optimize the sessions that we do and the time that they spend doing it. And then we look at the outcomes of the businesses. So how many presentations are they giving to households every week? How many sales are resulting from those presentations, and what's the conversion rate? How many sales do we get for the number of presentations they do? So we can see how they're hovering and how well we're doing over time, and can adjust and improve the performance of these teams. So what are the results? We see that exactly what we were hoping would happen has happened. So the red line, the first one is the actual number of sales. The second chart is the percentage. The red line is retailers. The darker blue line, sorry, the lighter blue line is, there we go, lighter blue line is Mason installers. So what we've seen happening over time is direct sales to households by retailers going down, Mason sales directly households shooting up. So that attention on direct sales by Masons is replacing what the retailers were doing directly to households. So a quick summary of the results. The pool of businesses has grown tremendously. Our actual project design called for, I think, around 50 business partners. We're now up to about 480, and 60% of those now are Mason installers who are doing direct outreach to households. From 2021 to 2022, we've seen sales leap 75% over a very short period of time. Sales by MIs that are trained in this DQ approach comprise about now 22% of total sales, and that's up from 5 in 2021. So very rapid progress. And the conversion rate has been about a healthy 26%. Depending on the business advisor, it can go up even to 30, 40%. So some takeaways. Generate and use evidence to fail fast. Move quickly, learn and adapt early on with evidence. And also beware, as Jonathan was saying, of one-size-fit-all assumptions and approaches. Households want different approaches. They want different solutions for the problems they have. Consumers can identify their own issues. This DQ approach is problem-led. You start with the problems, you end with a solution. And selling, it's underappreciated, and it needs to be included in a sustained countrywide capacity building approach for business. Lastly, you can't just focus on the sales. Tyler tells me this all the time. The more you're guided by one outcome indicator, the less you're going to see the issues that need to be paid attention to along the way and adjusted. So having a focus on outputs as well of the team is critical to getting the outcomes you want. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Monty. Any questions from the audience instead of the microphone? Yeah, and then Monty, would you mind repeating the question?
Sure, no problem.
I wanted to go back to finding out the quality of Did you find that with that installation quality also improved over time, or was that tracked?
Yes, we have tracked that through a quality monitoring survey, actually. So exactly that thing. We found that this figure, the 80% of do-it-yourself, has gone down tremendously. I think it's gone down now to under 30% self-installation among a sample of about 1,000 households. So the focus on training of the businesses has certainly gotten results. And we're seeing that the quality, as it's measured in the survey, has gone up commensurate with that as well. It was a real concern of the government in the early days. They were seeing a lot of this. In fact, a kind of typical approach there is just ban it. So they actually banned Sato in the South in the early days because of these installations. But since we shifted and focused more on the skill sets of installing them in different ways, those quality issues have gone away in terms of the government attention to it, and our own monitoring survey shows as well that we've seen real increases in the quality of installation. Yeah.
Thank you, Monte. This is Mustafa. I want to forward one point. All the points that we raised push around the snap part. So how you link it with the key quality type with the superstructure one? Making the sanitation factor.
Yeah. Thank you for that. Sorry, I didn't repeat the first question, but I think I got it in the answer. So this question was about, in addition to these kinds of retrofits, and I guess the floor-based solutions, what about other things like the pits and the superstructures? These are all product packages that we've also introduced to businesses. We have a full training package technically that also includes cement ring production, other kinds of pit lining. With Lixil, actually, we're about to prototype a plastic pit liner that we'll be able to introduce to businesses. We have a full toilet model as well that's meant to be cost effective and we think responsive to a lot of what households need. And we've introduced that through training to our business partners as well. So like I showed you in the slide with all the different variations of products, those are all products and services that we've trained businesses to be able to deliver. Of course, it depends on the demand of households, how much they respond to that and take that up. But we're finding that those more advanced solutions, we think will be, attractive as well to a segment that wants and needs it. But it probably would be the next big step for the project would be placing more emphasis on some of the other products that could be sold through these kinds of approaches as well. Okay. Sorry, my acknowledgements. The team is here. Hopefully you'll have a chance to talk to them all. Sorry, Anne.
It's okay.
There you go.
So I think my presentation will be the shortest because I can just say ditto. AXE started in 2016 and we just closed in September 2022. It's similar to the two previous projects, maybe one difference, I don't know in detail completely with the other projects, but we also had a water component that included construction, but also water quality was part of our project. So not to be redundant, I don't want to go through all of the same things about product development, about retrofitting, about designing product lines. All of these things were part of our approach, learning about the products, learning about installation, learning about the different business models. And our key word was always agility, agility, agility for the enterprises. So just to sort of put that umbrella over sort of a bit more of what I'm going to talk about. Obviously, we started with needing to generate demand for the sanitation products, and develop affordable, attractive, and environmentally adapted products. So this was sort of our juxtaposition at the beginning of the project. We were focused on sanitation marketing. So design to have promotional materials that communicated the aspects of the product, but also the installation, sales, if there was financing available, how to access that. So a complete set of marketing materials, who the key players were in the supply chains. We worked initially in 6 regions. We expanded to the entire country except for the capital city by the end of the project. So knowing in each one of those regions who the key suppliers were in the supply chain was important. Evaluating potential sales volume, helping businesses understand the relationship between being able to make that evaluation, set targets, and help them plan for their business growth and what they needed to do that type of growth. Any friction in the supply chain earlier on that we could identify it and come up with solutions for it. Assessing the model's delivery capacity, what was the messaging around the different types of products, and then expansion and monitoring. So we did a lot of monitoring. We had annual client survey, client quality survey that we did. And this was really important to us because it helped us understand better what was working, what was not working. And it helped us communicate also to the enterprises where their own issues were. In our market assessment, and I have to shout out to my friend John Sauer, who's sitting in the back there, who helped us do an MBA in the initial stage of the project, identify what were current failures in the market. So consumer demand because of a lack of desirable, affordable products, service providers the quality of the service providers, their understanding of the market. The distortion due to subsidies, there's high subsidies in Senegal. And then the financial capacity of the businesses. And then we identified factors that indicated that there were market readiness, that there was a possibility because there were marketing channels. The subsidies were on the decline in Senegal because there was a new policy document that came out stating that in 15 years, we want to have private sector sanitation. So USAID decided to say, no, we're going to do it now. We don't need to wait 15 years. There was increasing business interest in the sector and consumers desired improved toilets. So we determined that there was potential for market growth. And so our next step was to focus on not a completely new product, so similar to the Uganda and Ethiopia projects, taking a product line that existed already, or at least standards from our perspective, they were product standards in Senegal, and working with the stakeholders, working with the households, obviously the consumers, working with the masons who are going to be in charge of installing the latrines, but also bringing in other stakeholders like savings and loans groups, like municipalities, people at the municipality level, to get also their feedback, figure out, you know, if we're going to price it at this level, would it be possible to have a loan to buy it? And just get that information as early as possible in the activity. So at the end of that process, we were able to say that throughout Senegal, the unhygienic, poorly constructed latrines could be converted to a double pit latrine that's hygienic, safe, and convenient. And our target was 150,000 households. So this was our starting point to start thinking about a brand, which is what I'm going to focus on. Axay used a brand approach because we felt that it was important to establish the image of quality around the latrine. It was an easy marker for people to be able to sell the latrine, and it created just a common, go-to word to be able to talk about the latrines. So in branding, we look at positioning, we look at delivery, we look at awareness, and we look at association. And for the positioning, in rural areas in Senegal, I don't know about in the other countries, but I think it's probably similar. So we're talking about 10 to 11 people per household. Mostly it's an agri-based population. They have cyclical revenue, so you kind of have to think about what time of the year is the best time of year to be selling an investment product. And how willing are people to pay for it? You know, what is their desire to really move up that sanitation ladder? And the challenge was a quality product, emptying options to make sure that everything was in line with our HCD approach. So an easily accessible pit latrine, dignity, safety, cleanliness, and easy to maintain. So we designed, and you can see the Sato pan is there, a convenient, clean, affordable latrine that provided all of the emotional triggers that we had identified. Segal was then launched, and our goal was to have all rural households switch over to this product through retrofitting or through a new latrine. The product, just very quickly, it's very similar to the other products. It's a non-sewer dry technology. It's durable. We use cement liners, but exclusively early in the project. We our latrines were lined with concrete, but then we realized that there are, you know, for geological reasons, there's parts of the country where you don't need it. So you can do a very thin, just a, you know, kind of a, I don't know the word in English. So, coating, there you go, of cement and a hard rock. Sometimes we didn't dig the pits as deep, facilitated emptying them. But also when you have a high water table, you don't want to go very deep. So we had that, just as the other two projects, this broad variety of latrines. And then we went on to think about who would own this. And this is a question that is still being debated. Right now, what has happened in Senegal is that with the close of the project, there is no formal ownership. We have about 32 businesses that are operating with this product using this brand. There's no legal framework around that, but it does allow them to use the quality marker that we designed. So the brand representatives are the experienced businesses who are used to using it and who know how to sell it. I have to say here that the Sato pan is a key element in the latrine. And this is a question that we've discussed with Lixil, because there is, I don't know if it's confusion, but there is strong association with Sato products and the Sagal brand latrine. Okay. Quality assurance, I'm going to go faster now. I got the 2-minute warning. Yeah, we did the marketing. We did a lot of investment in mass media marketing. It's not the most effective. It's useful, but where we got the most traction was with local marketing, using radios, using person-to-person, door-to-door. Everybody, all of our stakeholders, everybody's trained in race. We didn't have the luxury of having Roy come in and visit us, but we did have John Sauer. And so we did benefit from that technology or that technique. So we do a lot of events around the product and around the brand. Our brand is focused on dignity and family. It's one of the top 3 sanitation brands that households recognize in Senegal. So there was a survey, what's the sanitation brand that you know of, and Sagal came up, you know, as number 3. So 30% of households surveyed, they can recall it. And 76% of the customers were satisfied with the product. This is important for us because, again, it was a quality marker. That was our motivation to actually create the brand. So we really, really spend a lot of time keeping track of quality. Our tagline is to preserve the dignity and honor in the family. It's a very, very emotional brand. There's a lot of messages in our media, in our mass media. And even in our flyers, we make sure that we remind people of the emotional markers, but also that they're customizable products. The strengths, it's ranked high, there's willingness to pay, a lot of post-purchase satisfaction. There's limited influence on households in the buying process. There's low brand awareness, even though we are number 3 overall, there's not a lot of brands. So I think in the total population, it's not that high. Potential options to continue growing the brand, leverage more local actors, improve the marketing channel efficiency and sharpen positioning. So those are kind of some insights on positioning and delivery models. I think some of the the important things that we've really learned is that customer feedback has helped us improve it, even though the brand hasn't moved, but the quality behind the product is still growing. And so today, when the project ended, this is coverage in Senegal of latrines that we built, over 14,000, almost 15,000 latrines at the end of the activity. So I just want to say one thing about part of our success was because we were able to crowd in financing. It wasn't easy, but we were able to do it both for the supply side and for households. We did learn some things from doing this. Financial institutions don't understand water and sanitation. So it's really important. There's no assumption to be made that they can do it without being coached, without being trained, without being introduced to why and what. So that needs to be there. Cash flow is a challenge for everyone. Loans and savings can help smooth cash flow if they can be positioned in the right way. So it's something to think about. Loan schedules should always be adapted to the revenue cycles. We ran into a lot of problems because they didn't do that. Group lending can help attenuate risk. You can bundle investments with productive activities to make it easier to make the sale. And MFIs have very large client databases. They can be really key partners in marketing. If they understand the product, if they're convinced that they have a loan product that they want to couple with it, you can reach a lot of clients. Thank you. Want to go into the panel or?
Yeah, are there any questions for Anne before I move to the panel? Okay, excellent. Could I, oh, yes, please.
Yeah, hi, my name is Jette Finsen. I'm with the AI. In your last slide, you said you bundled, and there was some bundling with the sale with some products. Do you have examples of what you did?
Yeah, we have one financial institution that we work with that is bundling a latrine sale with ag inputs. So when they get the ag input loan, they get a top up on the loan to purchase the latrine, and then they pay it off over a longer period of time. So they're adjusting a little bit the payment schedule.
Okay, thank you very much. Let's give one more round of applause to the speakers.
So thank you everyone for your attention. Thank you to our terrific speakers. So if you have a question for the panel, if you have a question for a specific participant, please feel free to address them, but otherwise you can just give it to the panel generally. I see Kellogg is approaching the mic, so yeah, please kick us off. And for everyone, if you could introduce yourself as you ask the question. Thank you.
Yeah, Kellogg Schwab, Johns Hopkins University. Really interesting, fascinating. I had a couple clarification questions and a comment. One of them was, and the comment is how long this takes. That was mentioned in there about, and the willingness to accept the failure, fail fast and forward, but still having faith that this is going to take some time. And so maybe you could reflect on that. And I have a couple questions though, technically, like when others are building these things and you have something that's 10 meters deep, 30 feet to 40 feet, that's a pretty deep hit. Was that part of the non-trained group because the houses were used to it, or, you know, there's this kind of understanding? And the other question, so if I can ask the last one, I didn't notice that these, maybe I just missed it. Are these ventilated improved pit latrines, or was designed on the trap being the one on there? I saw some, but it didn't look consistent in the delivery of the products. And there was this kind of baseline concrete slab, which is great, but the smell and other issues, supplies and all that, that could be from the VIP. Is that part of that? So I'll leave it there and I don't want to pick a couple and then respond or whatever.
I think we'll have a couple from you and then we'll respond to this first batch and then the other two. So we have about how long this is taking, the life cycle, the depth of the latrines and also the VIP. I don't want to suppose, but Janie, would you be interested in kicking us off with approximately how long, this takes to start to introduce people to market-based sanitation in a community and then to start the enterprises and, as with your experience on the implementer and the aid side?
Yeah, thank you. I mean, for the market-based sanitation to be implemented and say that the market start to boost or the market start to be stable or scaled, it may take more than 5 years. From our experience, I mean, I was part of Transform Wash. The activity was started like 2017. So for the first 3-4 years, the result was not as such as expected, but increasing. But in the fourth year, fifth year, then the result is increasing so much. So for the market to stable or for the market to be known by the community and the system, the private sector is well understand the system, the model. This may take more than 5 years, if I understand correctly your question. Maybe in the depths of maybe the pit latrine, it's vary actually based on the context. So the technology can fit to anything, and regardless of the depths of the pit, actually, the technology can fit to any latrine. But the superstructure thing requires a little bit stronger carrying capacity kind of things, like the iron bar. Maybe in Ethiopia, the bamboo and local technologies like replacing iron bar with bamboo. So in that case, when the pit is very deep and the dimension of the pit is a little bit wide, it requires different structure. Yeah.
I mean, in the private sector, having them wait 3 to 5 years for a market is a skill.
Yeah.
To have that actually go in there. And I'm just thinking of how to go to scale with this to other communities and then other, countries, how we integrate this training and understanding lessons learned, that this is a critical thing, but you're going to not get a quarterly return on an investment. It's not what they teach in Business 101. So it's just that kind of an interesting thing. I get it, but it's more that interaction. I think it sounds like you guys were working from the get-go on that. So thank you.
Sure. Maybe to the second question about the pit depth. So 30 to 40 feet is pretty typical for certain places there in rural Uganda. We were trying to get people to dig shallower, partly because of the cost that's involved. It's actually quite expensive to dig a pit quite that deep, but they see it, as a sunk cost, as a one-time sunk cost. There's currently no safely managed types of emptying services in these places. They're concerned if they were to have a shallower pit, that after a relatively short time, they would need to do something with that waste. And currently, there really aren't any other alternatives. And I think that that's also why and I think that this came out of the example from Ethiopia as well. There really is a market for like the retrofits, for the improvements. And that's because typically like these pits are really quite deep and they're going to be there for a long time. And so households already feel like that they've made a pretty substantial investment, and they would like to be able to extend the life of that investment rather than investing in a totally new facility.
Okay, thanks, Jonathan. Let's go to the next question.
Hi, Matt Freeman from Emory University. Thank you all for the presentation. First question is, a lot of the challenges, especially I think in my experience with Ethiopia, is that the rains come and the toilet facilities get washed away or the superstructure gets destroyed. And it's the rebuilding, which is really the challenge, not so much there's lots of ODF communities, but then they regress. Has that been inbuilt in any of the programming that you've done? And the second part is, do you have plans or monitoring in place to see these businesses move forward after the core support from USAID goes away? And how will you make sure, or how have you ensured that continuation of these markets? And last one, bonus question, if what's your favorite thing or most interesting question that you think is like the next phase of the question you want to know about how this might work in the future? Like, what's the remaining thing that's on your mind? Like, what do we do about this one particular thing? Thanks.
Thanks, Matt.
Can I just say, just answer the question about sorry, your second question, the business.
Sustainability of the businesses.
Right.
How are you monitoring?
Yeah. So AXE was a little bit longer. So we ran from 2016 to 2022. The last 2 years, the businesses that we were supporting, we would put them into, categorize them into cohorts according to what we felt were their capacity and their level of viability. And we let, for the last 2 years of the project, we let at least one cohort just work without us supporting them to monitor actually that and see what happened. And then the other cohorts received digressive support from the activity to see, from 3 or 4 years from creation to actually being operationally self-sufficient, is there a moment when all of a sudden it just works? It doesn't work for all of them. Not everybody's an entrepreneur, but we do have, a little group of enterprises who have, and two of the things that we see with the ones that are really emerging, one is diversification. They're not, sanitation, okay, but they're doing other things. So, and they're also, the second one is that the B2B, they're coming together to capture larger market share. And so when they do that, it boosts everybody's cash flow and everybody's capacity to operate.
On your first question about conditions for the businesses to address, it's so variable across a country as diverse as Ethiopia. We have, drought conditions in part of the country, we have flood conditions in other parts of the country, and everything in between. So that's why our approach has been so variable, to build into businesses the skills they need to respond to the demand in their area. So there hasn't been any one approach. I would say the most consistent across has been the retrofitting that we've talked about, because that seems to be the highest amount of demand, the lowest hanging fruit for what households want. But for issues like, whole superstructures being washed away or pit collapse, we've tried to address those too through specific construction skills that businesses in those areas can adopt. On the third question about what we see, what's next, it is about the sustainability question. Once a USAID supported program goes away, how does this work continue? That, we can say the life is 5 years, 10 years, 15 years. I mean, as long as businesses are growing, emerging in some way, there's a need for them to build their own capacity to meet the demand and the needs of customers in their area. So our focus now is shifting more to what we can do to build local institutions that can continue this work, whether it's educational through the TVETs, I think we've been hearing about, through educational programs specifically designed for businesses and for this sector, for programming that the government can advance, much like Uganda. A market-based sanitation guideline has been revised and I would say made more business friendly, so that government understands its role vis-a-vis the market and businesses and can support them and put forward their own programs that do similar work to what we're doing. So those are just a couple of examples, but across the board, that's what we see as the next phase of our work. How does this last for far into the future?
Great, thanks, everyone. Okay, and we'll limit to just these two who are standing, please.
Hi, I'm Mark Radin from RTI, and I had two questions. One is, can you guys talk about equity or the role of subsidies in market-based sanitation and where you think that, how they should align with that? And then also, can you talk a little bit about what you think the role of different levels of administration of government should be in supporting market-based sanitation?
I guess since I have the mic, I'll keep talking. Subsidy has been a very important topic for us, thanks to WASH pals to a large extent, because of the demand curve that we were able to create in Ethiopia and look at the impact of pricing on demand. We realized that a significant proportion of the population, maybe up to 40%, wouldn't be able to afford even simple latrine solutions. There's a big chunk in the section that could, if they had access to more loan capital. And then, of course, there are many who can pay for it out of their own resources. So thanks to that analysis, we've been able to go to the government, Ministry of Health and Water, to advocate for more loan capital availability for the sector and for looking at subsidy programs as well. Subsidy was a dirty word a few years ago. It used to be the only word even earlier than that. We've moved from subsidy to no subsidy, and now we're coming back somewhere in between. So rather than talk a lot about this, I'll make a plug for Thursday at 3:30 p.m. Lars Osterwalder, from our partner IRC WASH, will be giving a whole presentation about a sanitation subsidy pilot that we've just finished undertaking with the Ministry of Health. That's looked at issues around administration, levels of subsidy that are appropriate, and uptake based on that subsidy. So I'll make that plug to attend that session.
So one thing that NACSE did about subsidy, because we did have a lot in the market, was help our businesses see it as an opportunity and to figure out ways to position themselves to be the go-to partner. So when an NGO is going to subsidize, that they know that that Sagal product is the highest quality and it's locally made, and that they are there to provide it. And so it actually turned out to be a way to increase revenue for the businesses, and it raised their visibility and the visibility of the product. And so the product actually expanded into the country a little bit, because NGOs were they wanted to take it to other parts of Senegal where we didn't yet have a business partner.
Yeah, the topic for subsidies is clearly like a one that's quite hot here in the sector, and is going to be one that's going to be around, for the next few years. I think we all need to recognize that even the existence of these projects is a subsidy in some way. It's an injection of funds in to a market that we're trying to get to work better. But for the work that we did, we really focused on the small incentives to the sales agents, the training for the masons who weren't really used, obviously, and to all of the work that went into the community meetings, and such. There were no subsidies to the households. So that was their investment to the market. I think that for the sector though, that this question for subsidies in some ways comes down to sequencing. A lot of what I've been hearing here at this meeting is the importance of capacity building, of skilling, the importance of having government-led types of monitoring systems. So I think the question for us is it possible to have a subsidy that's not going to fully distort the market without those two things in place? And I think that in really most of the places that we work, that those two things probably should be like a precursor to the subsidy conversation. I realize in some countries, it seems to be moving ahead. I think partly, that's just because it seems to be such like a sexy topic right now. But I think that we should really be focusing on the fundamentals, like the M&E system and like the skilling, and then try to figure out some way to slowly get the subsidies in there.
Great, thanks, Jonathan. And we'll have the last question. I see that it's at 3 p.m. For those who have meetings at 3 p.m., if you feel free to file out quietly, but please, for the last question.
Yeah, my name is Donna Kudago, coming from Habitat for Humanity. In fact, I was shocked to hear that those that you trained actually build the less number of latrines. And this is very shocking because that's an investment. But at the same time, I feel you trained them because you wanted to improve quality.
Yeah.
And now those who have done the work did not get that training. So my question is, to what extent are both of these groups connected to the government in such a way that the government can monitor and ensure quality assurance for communities that they will be going in future to work? That's the first one. And then the second one is, you've all talked about the successes that have come from the work that you've done so far. My question is, to what extent did these successes that, you got from the work influence government policies towards easy access to loans in the various countries that you worked in? If there's any example you want to share, that would be very helpful. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. If we could have brief responses, maybe one of you for each of the questions.
Sure, James, let me take the first one. So currently there's no quality control type of system there in rural Uganda. There are people like health assistants, health inspectors, etc., who could play that role. They're really looking at it from more of a public health side and not so much, the quality of the infrastructure. Like I said earlier, I think quality control is something that we need to continue to monitor, to be cognizant of. At this point, we haven't seen that be a real challenge. And like I said, because of the technologies that were introduced, we think that these things, have been around for a while and that people already have a pretty good sense of how to build them. Thanks.
And Jajenu, do you want to have the last word? Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you for the question. I mean, the second one, to what extent the success of this project is influencing the government is, it's a critical question that tied to the ownership and the sustainability kind of thing. From the experience of TWASH, since the activity started, through partnership with the government, close partnership with the government. So now One Wash National Program included market-based sanitation in the program document as one of the approach, which is one of the indicator for ownership of the government. Once it is included in the government document, is going to be, at least for some times, going to be implemented. The second issue that I am going to mention in this regard is Ministry of Health also adopted. When sanitation marketing introduced in the country, it was vague for all of us, even for the Ministry of Health to endorse a guideline in 2013. Then it was, the name says, sanitation marketing, but now understanding that the market influence for sanitation improvement, the name is adapted to market-based sanitation guideline, and that training manual is followed by this implementation guidelines. So Ministry of Health on these documents and even use that as continuous professional development tool for the professional as a part of capacity building. So I believe, USAID Ethiopia with implementing partners is working on this regard for sustainability and ownership. In addition to this, two basic document is going on. And we are expecting them to recently. The first one is WASH capacity building guideline for national WASH capacity building guideline. Since yesterday morning, we are talking about WASH capacity building guidelines. So it's with the strategy and the training manuals. This is one. Similarly, for the private sectors and with international consultant, the capacity building component is also under design. So that the government sector or the WASH agency adopts the market-based sanitation and they include in their programming. Good to stop here. Yeah.
Great. Thank you very much, Janae. Okay, can I have a round of applause for our panelists? Thank you all. And thank you all for your great participation. Very nice job. Really great work. Excellent work.